Hello, everybody. Today, I had quite a special message that I wanted to share. It's actually made me a little bit teary thinking about it and preparing it this morning. But I feel that God wanted me to hold up a particular prop for the spiritually unequal marriage community and show you it. So here goes. It's a heavy prop. So just bear with me. Okay, it's this. Hang on, just checking my video. Okay, it's this. It's an enormous book, and it's a book that we, the spouses of our beloved pre-believers, hold in our hands. So it's a big, heavy book. I'll just turn it around. It's a book that's been sitting in my house for several years. I just love it. It's so big, old, and mysterious looking. And today God wanted me to use it as a prop. So there we go. And I'm going to put it over here because I probably can't hold it up long enough. But what I felt God wanted to say to us today is that we hold something very special in our hands, and it's something very precious, and it's the book of our spouse's lives, or our spouse's life that God has written over them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and I wanted to look at a couple of scriptures. So this whole topic of the book of our life that God has written is quite mysterious. It's only tucked away in a couple of places in scripture. So the first one is Revelation 20, verse 12. And it says, it's talking about the great white throne judgment. And it's John who's having a vision, and he says, "And I saw the dead, small and great, standing before God, and books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged according to their works by the things which were written in the books." So in that part of scripture, it suggests that there's a book that's written, but it's a book about the way you've responded to certain things in your life, or the way you've lived your life, I suppose. Not related to salvation, but it's something perhaps that will be looked at and talked about. And this whole thing is a mystery, really, in scripture, and one we can talk to God about and ask him more. But then the other verse is one that I talked about last week, and it's Psalm 139, and it's verse 16, and it says, this is King David now, "Your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed, and in your book they all were written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them." So those two scriptures about these books in heaven, how amazing. Those two scriptures about the books in heaven. The one in Psalms 139 suggests that there's a book of days that God has written and planned, almost like a blueprint for our life. And the version in Revelation suggests that the book will also contain records of how we have responded to those days. So far, so good. But one thing that God has led me to be considering this week, actually, has been the fact that my husband has a book. Everyone has a book. And as his wife, my job is to treat that as the most precious thing I possibly can, in that I've got a call to steward it in whatever way that looks. And there's that parable in Matthew 25 of the talents, where a master leaves his servants a certain number of talents, so different talents for different servants. And then the master comes back and looks at how the servants have invested the talents that they were given. And what God's been leading me to see is that the way I steward my marriage and my husband's walk with God, I suppose, his faith life, as far as I can, is very much like being given a talent or a number of talents, and these talents in scripture in that parable refer to money, I think, but it's an analogy. So that's like I've been given something, a talent or a set of talents that I need to invest and I need to steward and I need to look after them very carefully. How we do that is a whole other issue. But I think what God was saying, has been saying to me this week, is there is a book that's been written about his life, just like there's a book that's been written about my life. And many of you will know that I spent much of my adult life not walking with God, not in any way close to God. And then only in recent years turned to God and then started to kind of embrace all the things God had for me. But I've always had a sense that I, at the same time, couldn't actually reach God until the time was right. And so while there is free will and there is the fact that we respond to the things God's called us to do, there's also the fact that no one can come to the Father, no one can come to Jesus unless or until the Father draws them. And Jesus in the Gospels went round, and a lot of what he did was opening people's eyes. And I almost wonder whether there was kind of a timing issue around that, in that people were allowed to stay blind for certain periods of time, and then Jesus came and opened their eyes. And there was their part in it too, in that they wanted their eyes to be opened or they asked for it. But there was also the fact that supernaturally their eyes had to be opened. And so I think for us, one thing we need to bear in mind is that in this book where God has written a certain set of days for our spouse, there's going to be a timing aspect to it as well. And one of the examples here in scripture that we can really draw on and get inspiration from is the story of Elizabeth and Zechariah, who were John the Baptist's parents. And what you see with them is that they each had a time where their mouths were released and they were given words to speak, so a ministry, if you like. So in the case of Elizabeth, she was barren, then became pregnant, and then Mary came to visit her when she was pregnant with Jesus. And that was sort of Elizabeth's time of kind of moving into her call, being able to speak out words of encouragement to Mary. That's in Luke 1. So that was a real sort of, at that point, God gave Elizabeth these words to speak and sort of moved her into her particular ministry, if you like. We've all got ministry of some sort. So that was Elizabeth's time. But separate to that, there was Zechariah, who was married to Elizabeth. And while Mary was visiting Elizabeth and they were having this wonderful time together as fellow believers, Zechariah had actually been made mute by God for the period of Elizabeth's pregnancy. And then only when John the Baptist was born did Zechariah's mouth supernaturally open, and at that point he spoke out words of his own that made his friends and neighbours marvel. And if he had not been mute, then perhaps the friends and neighbours wouldn't have marvelled so much when his mouth was open. And so I think what God is wanting to say to us today is, in a marriage, you might have different timings in terms of when your mouths will be open. But timing, you know, if you are having to wait for a spouse, like Elizabeth had to wait for Zechariah's mouth to be open, the timing is going to have its purpose, and all in the proper time, all in the proper time. So let's be patient. Let's care for our spouses' faith life and treat this thing as precious as far as we can. If God has given you words about your spouse that tell you something that's in here, then treat it as the most precious possession you can, and pray into it and believe it and talk to God about it. but also let's rest in the knowledge that there's also timing, perfect timing at play. At the end of the day, it's God's great clock that is ticking and guiding our lives. So let's settle into it, relax, and enjoy the ride. Exciting stuff. So I'll leave it there, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys next week. It's such a joy doing these Facebook posts. I love doing them and love this community and love your encouragement. And it's just a very special place, this spiritually unequal marriage community. So thanks to all of you, and just sending loads of love and blessings from here today. Bye.